You're tuned in to RX'D Radio.
Now you're done at, what time is it over? 6 p.m. and you're done as a strength coach? You've made it, sir. You've made it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with no need of an introduction, Ben Prentiss, thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate you coming.
I appreciate you having me.
Well, so for those of you unaware, which, you've kind of specialized, I guess, I don't know. I don't even know if it's safe to say you've specialized in hockey. You're just really good at that and other shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, everybody likes to throw out numbers, but I legitimately spent the time and counted, and I've trained athletes in 37 different sports over the course of 30 years, and everybody thinks I'm the hockey guy, but I have trained year-round a guy who just signed a $102 million contract in the NFL. So there's other sports as well, but yeah, hockey has been something that over the past 20 plus years seems to be, but I've done skeleton to judo to hockey to squash, you name it, we've done it.
I mean, 37 highlights got to be in there at 37. I'm trying to think of what's the most obscure thing.
Well, obviously tactical things like Navy SEAL. I don't even know if that's a sport, but that certainly counts. I've had 3 go in and 1 make it. One going into Delta right now, so he made it all the way through, and now he's going for Delta, which is the ultimate. So a lot of military, and then probably the most odd ones like, horse roping, horse rodeo. That's pretty random for a sport. Going down to, no highlight. Does highlight still exist?
I think in the right retirement community in Miami, someone's betting on highlight right
now.
Is Frank and Estelle Costanza are betting on highlight.
As a kid, yeah, that was like the most crooked sport to bet on. Throw highlight game. I mean, I'm dating myself, but yeah, that's a random one.
So where did it start? I mean, where did it start? Obviously, a career that spans many decades, many sports, all successful across both time and space. Where, when you got into it, it's always interesting. The advisory board at Spoken kind of has all walks of life and different ways to practice in this field. But the origin story of I want to get into strength and conditioning as a career. What was that trajectory for you initially?
I mean, that's a great question because unfortunately, that's, I guess, another time, but I don't necessarily know if I would join strength and conditioning now if I was 20 years old and the world that it exists and how it is. But, and I say that in all seriousness with not trying to sound like an old grumpy person because I'm not. And it's more like, this is the landscape of, I sort of hit the sort of trifecta of what it takes, I guess, in that I started lifting weights seriously when I was 3 years old. And people are like, what? Well, because my father, when I was 3 years old, moved us from Norwalk, Connecticut to Venice Beach, California. So because he was a mechanic and he did 2 things in his life really well. And that was work on Porsches and he was a power lifter. So, and at that time, they're bodybuilding and powerlifting. They weren't separate gyms. So he trained at, most people. So he trained at Vince's gym, which is Vince Gironda, and he trained at Gold's Gym. And Arnold was there, and he has stories of me being in the crate and Arnold. More Dave Draper, the blonde bomber. I actually have in my office Dave Draper stuff sent to me. But so, lifting weights sort of then as just a 3-year-old being around it. And then the only thing that was important to me my whole life was really, Porsches, pit bulls, sports, and girls. And that's really the only things that mattered to me. So I sounds stupid, but it really is true. So I just played sports my whole entire life. While my father had this background, at the birth of working out and powerlifting. And so all of these athletic, I didn't even really like working out when I was young. It's like I wanted to just play hockey and play basketball and baseball and soccer. And so, but when I got old enough to see that the working out helped facilitate what I'm doing, it took me to university where, again, this is at the time where, exercise science and kinesiology and biomechanics were very much like a glorified gym class, essentially. It wasn't, so you really had to get self-taught. So, being in a University of Tampa, which is really unbelievable biomechanics department, in the beginning, exposed me to working out, sports, girls, and really learning how to self-educate myself and learning how to start training people when it didn't exist. So fast forward, I got out of school. I graduated I've said this story a million times. I graduated on Friday, and I was for $12 an hour training 12-hour sessions a day when personal training didn't even exist. This is like 1994. And I was doing 12 sessions a day. I'll never forget it. And I did it for 6 months. I got trainer of the month every year. Wait for it. It gets good. So I started bringing into the gym this thing called a Swiss ball. And I was carrying it under my arm, and everybody in the gym were like laughing at me, thinking this like stupid thing. At the time, again, I'm like 23 years old. Basically, you had Paul Chek, who, this is pre-Paul Chek, like
If you know what that means, you know what that means.
If you know, you know. You know. So, I had all his tapes and audio tapes of scientific back, scientific Swiss ball. People my age will remember all these, and you could get certified in all of these Czech courses. And then you had Donald Chu, who was like on the plyometric side. And then you had Charles Poliquin. And you had Vern Gambetta, but he wasn't like kind of as popular. So you kind of pick your mentor at the time where you really had like 4 people to choose from. Louis Simmons, I started getting all of his tapes. I started using bands at the gym that I was at and started just hooking bands onto everything because of Louis and messing around with that. And, that's when I started to say, hey, I'm going to open up a gym. I'm not going to rent. So I was at this one-on-one gym, and it wasn't for athletes. So I would go in the back and had people do box jumps. And I had a couple of football players that the moms would like send their kids in for me. And, I just knew innately, I didn't know, but again, I knew, I'm like, this is not really the way to train athletes. There's got to be a better way. So digging. And I ran into Charles and his books and his courses, and I went all in. And I opened my gym in 1999, which opened in 2000. So I'm just celebrating 25 years of owning the gym. And, I opened it with a hope and a prayer and knowing nothing about business or what it would do. And just, when you're young, you're fearless. And I had 3 employees. The only equipment I got in there was equipment that I liked that really had nothing to do with athletic. I had like flex, hammer strength, the Streamline, which doesn't exist anymore, Atlantis. So I went to the Atlantis in like 98. I drove to Montreal, my father and I, and looked at all that equipment there. And so I got all this equipment, and then horrible things happened right when I opened. I mean, 9/11 happened a year and a half after I opened, and we had people in my gym that passed, and family that passed, and they commuted. And so for people that weren't around our area, didn't know how hard that hit us and the economy and everything. We were right in there, and then we sort of get back on our feet, and Charles calls, and anybody that knows Charles was like, hey. So I did my first internship with him in Colorado Springs in like 95. He was in the basement. See, this is like, people talk about, this is reality. Like Charles had a knack and the people around him to make these myths and these non-factual things that actually occurred in his career. And I was essentially there. So Chad Akia, where I don't know where he is now, but he was a weightlifter. He went on to open up a gym in Arizona, and then he went to Hawaii. I think he's back in Arizona. He was Charles's very first trainer, Chad Akia. I was second. So Chad worked in Colorado Springs. They were in the basement of Testosterone Nation, T Nation. So T Nation had all these old, like, again, these giant Med-X machines that you could isometrically test your neck, your lower back, really cool machines. And then Charles had in the corner a Strive leg curl, which is now prime for all these, meatheads, and Strive, an Atlantis rack. And he would have guys fly in for 2 days, give him a program. Like, no one trained there. So he had a secretary, Gretchen, Chad, and Charles. So I went there, did a week's internship, and Charles was like, hey, so then fast forward, I open my gym, I go through all this stuff, I'm barely breathing, I'm still trying to identify what I'm doing. It's 2002. Hey, Benito, you have 24 hours. I've selected you to be my coach. Not like, nowadays it's like, well, how much are you going to pay me? Where am I going to live? That was it. 24 hours. I owned my own gym. And I just knew, like, hey, this is the only guy that, like, I could actually train pro athletes from dawn to dusk at 20, 24, now 25, and really cut my teeth. So I'm like, all right, fuck it, I'm going. And I left my gym praying that they would stay afloat. And I went there from Easter to the end of NFL training camp. And that was the start of me. So Charles would just sit on his computer all day, look at fitness girls and write programs. And he would slide the programs underneath the desks and, tell me, here. And then I would train the athletes. And then Dr. Keith Pine, who's now the head of the Dodgers, he won a World Series. It was him doing all the ART, me doing the training, and Charles doing the writing of the programs, and that was it. And that was the beginning of Charles's, he went from Colorado, Chad left, I came in, and then I did that for 3 summers until I started getting going and like getting my kind of, what I tell this story too, so Jason Arnott, who played for, 1,400 games, something crazy.
Legend.
Yeah. So I trained him through Charles. But when you talk about things doing the right way, so Charles, like, didn't even talk to him. Like, he walked in and he's like, I'll collect the money. Ben, go do everything. I tested him, trained him, da-da-da. And then I would fly to Wasaga Beach once a month. Charles would have me go to Calgary to the Olympic Center and train guys there, fly back to Arizona, fly to Wasaga Beach, check on him, come back, and I would just go flying all over the place, checking all these guys. Arnie was like, hey, look, this is crazy, man. Like, why don't you just train me? And I'm like, no. I'm not. No way am I crossing this dude. So Charles did that for like 4 years, and that was it. And then he started getting into the certifications and everything. So I was like, hey, look, I'll buy Jason off you. Like, I want to do the right thing. And Charles, to his credit, was like, hey, you can have him. It's fine. But, when we talk about all the unethical things that go on now where it's just beyond, that was something where it was just like, you take him. So he was my first guy. And then, it just kind of went. So that's why his jersey is like, the minute you walk into my gym, I think I have like 170 something NHL jerseys. He was the very first NHL jersey that, like, that I was a part of in the beginning, but like truly took care of. So that's a little bit of the story.
So obviously Charles, massive influence on your career peripherally. I never actually met him. I came close once. I was in LA at Nick Mitchell's Ultimate Performance Gym when he just opened it.
So that was later, like.
Really towards the end of his life.
Yeah.
And I remember he was doing a seminar. I was going to go, and I opted to have lunch with Nick, and a guy from the seminar came in about halfway, like middle of the afternoon, and Nick. And the guy was like, Nick was like, well, why aren't you at the seminar? I was like, Charles is just like ripping people apart. Like, he's just like, you're weak, you're fat, you're short, you're this, you're that. Now, you mentioned earlier about like the role how early that in your career that diet nutrition was kind of like instantiated into the philosophy through the interning with Charles. I'm curious because obviously we came together through Spoken, and your expertise is really at the heart of the product line. What has changed in your philosophy around like performance nutrition and supplementation from back then? Because Charles, people who followed his career, some of the gaffes, some of the things we were proven wrong, the supplementation protocols. Then I remember
I could tell stories.
Like, can you legally?
No. I can tell some stories legally, and then the other ones you got to wait for my book. But like Andre Benoit, like there's only a few people that go way, way, way back that really like spend enough time that knows, like, I mean, okay, to answer your question, less is more. And I think that's one thing. I used to really focus on like the before and the after, and wanting all of my guys to be underwear models and basing the success of the off season on if they're shredded or not. And the reality of it is it does matter, but the answer lies in the middle, which with most things that people ask me, it's like, it's not like somebody's all this or somebody's this. The answer usually lies in the middle. And in this case, diet absolutely matters. But I like to say they'll look like underwear models as a or as a side effect of eating and training, but that's not the goal. If you look across the board in any sport, again, you can, of course, what about this guy? But generally speaking, in 90 percentile across the board, the most jacked, lean dude is not usually the best player. And that, take it for what it is. I'm not saying that means eat shit, but I just probably 10 years ago or so, I've still done that 14 site body fat that matches up to a DEXA scan. I have written over like 90,000 programs since 2000, and I have a database that keeps it since 2006. And so you can add more than that. And I've been doing that body fats. I was teaching them with Charles. I can now do that body fat 14 sites with my eyes closed. I can grab people and do it. And I also, like you can ask my interns, I can look at somebody, I can do the body fat and tell you what you are before the number comes within 1%. But I've been doing it for 30 years. So we still do the body fat, but I certainly don't prescribe 50 supplements based on your Australian or insulin or cortisol or stress management or adrenals, etc. Less is more. And again, I also understand that nutrition is none of us really, everyone's so freaking positive, and people should be a lot less positive when it comes to nutrition, because there's a lot going on with the gut and things that we just aren't positive about. So, first of all, how many of these people are doing blood work on people before you're prescribing things? And like, I could tell you funny stories of, like, I train a lot of Russians that don't speak English, and like they're allergic to fish oil or fish or something, and you like giving them shit that you could, effectively kill them something. So it's really important to understand that less is more. You understand that these are athletes, not bodybuilders, and calories in. For example, I would say that most young athletes are actually malnourished. They come to us and they're going to school. They're not eating much. None of them eat breakfast. They don't eat much after. Then they come train. And then typically they get on the ice. I'm talking about during the season. They get on the ice at like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And they're mostly malnourished. They're dehydrated and malnourished, where ironically enough, the pros typically eat really, really well. And then during the season, they don't really eat well, which is odd. And I have a line where I say that I get everybody at the end of the summer, they're highly toxic, skinny, fat, and injured and weak. And that's what you get with an athlete at the end of their seasons. So at the peak of their play, so to speak, playoffs, championships, Stanley Cups, whatever, these guys are injured, they're toxic, they're skinny fat, they're weak, they're going on fumes. So to understand how to not only address a proper training program, but understanding how to, finesse the diet in instead of hitting them on the head like I used to do. Like, just being like, oh my God, I want you eating no carbs. The classic Charles is like, you could lick a prune every 3 weeks kind of shit. I mean, it's not necessary. And you still can get guys, I have a guy right now, he's put on 14 pounds of body weight and his body fat stayed the same while he's put on 11 pounds of muscle. And he's done that by, obviously, you're not going to do that eating zero carbs. So, and the supplementation is very, very simple. But that's the major thing that I've changed through Charles is I still emphasize diet. I still believe in it. It's still something huge, but I just don't want to focus on sort of these before and afters because that doesn't tell the tale of can you run faster, jump higher, increase more mobility, change direction, decelerate, do all of these things that you have to do as an athlete.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like the blood work and Poliquin. Anyone who's ever even opened a biosig, piece of reading material on biosignature, it almost read like the way people do blood work now of like if this then that, right? Like a lot of people look at nutrition and supplementation like empty gas tanks. Like this is low, so we're going to give you that. And it's just like, when you start to understand a little bit of the complexities around sort of that tensegrity model of training and nutrition and organ systems and hormones and what was sort of like your breakthrough? Because, when going through the formulas, Sleep Builder is obviously the one that kind of jumps out of the page, but we're talking about, sleep, but then you're talking about blood glucose and regulation. And we're talking about, digestive tract issues. Where did you start to kind of break away and form your own kind of your ethos around nutrition and supplementation? What was it for you that you're like, you know what, this 50,000 pills a day, everyone's got so much vitamin D, the sunshine out of their asshole. Like, I know we need to simplify and this is where we need to go. What was that breakthrough point for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for people to fathom pre-Instagram, right? So like, a lot of these decisions that we made, and I'm like, look, we produced Olympic athletes before a force plate, before timing gates, before Instagram. Like you could still do things. You just had to think, and you had to talk to people, and you had to read books, and you had to go to seminars. Like nobody wants to go to a seminar anymore because everybody's got it figured out. Shortly after I broke away from Charles's methods of training, I switched my style of training. Like Charles was a revolutionary because what he started doing. So, right, like I talk about bias all the time. And if you look, Louis Simmons, obviously there's bias. He was a power lifter. He believed athletes should train like power lifters. Obviously they shouldn't. I mean, I could go on and on about the tightest hips and internal range I've ever seen in my life for people who box squat, things like that. Charles was a bodybuilder. There was nothing more important to Charles than his arms and getting there. So it's like what he did was when early on he started going to holistic conferences when no one really, this was Huberman and all these guru holistic docs now. Charles would go to these conferences and he would take tidbits of all of this holistic doc stuff and put it into his. So what he did, for better or worse, you have a bodybuilding bodybuilding workout. So you're going to put on muscle. And if you're coming from the world of you just rode a bike forever, now you're going to lift weights and you're going to eat a low carb diet. And he was really the first one to introduce like high dose fish oil. And obviously we've tapered that back. But when it comes to like glutamine, yeah, you give credit to Bill Phillips and EAS early on. They had the hydrogen or HP, phosphagen HP was the creatine upload that they came out with. And, they came out with that. And then they came out with glutamine. And Charles was in that kind of group along with Bill Phillips and then started really pushing that thing. So when I started really making a name training a lot of athletes, meaning like that's all I did in my career is wake up in the morning, train athletes, write programs. I changed the way I train people. And that's when I broke away from, sort of this extreme low carb dieting, fat shaming, if you will, and, eliminating a lot of the unnecessary, 50 grams of glutamine post-workout, high dose fish oil. Charles was also the very first one to start using adaptogens like ashwagandha. He would use for sleep early on. Lion's mane, I remember using that. Rhodelia rosea, cordyceps. Like, this is 20 plus years ago. We were using all this stuff, and he was just kind of, the mad scientist, just throwing shit at these guys and hoping it sticks and getting results. But the results, like, what are you quantifying if you're a strength coach? Are you quantifying they were faster on the ice, or they got leaner and I did a good job? And I think most of the things he quantified success was they benched more, they were leaner, and their Scott curl went up. And not that that's wrong, I just didn't resonate with me anymore in beliefs of training an athlete. And so, you had Paul Chek doing wood chops and Swiss ball, and you had Charles doing Scott curls, and you had Louis doing box squats and dynamic effort. So, I somewhere in the middle of that pyramid took a little of all of it and, continued to make what I believe worked for athletes. So the nutrition went along with that. And sleep early on, we knew was a big deal, especially for people that know hockey, when you're dealing with the kind of drugs that they take during the year to sleep, right? Like hockey, they're taking shit to get going, get up, get up, get up. Then they can't get down after the game. So they can't, as I always say, you have to have a yin for your yang, man. I mean, you can't just drive that sympathetic and then all of a sudden try to flip the switch to get parasympathetic. So they struggle with sleep. And then the travel, the NFL doesn't have the travel that NBA and NHL have. And that travel through time zones and your circadian rhythm and really developing sleep etiquette. It's something that back then I believed in and was messing around with many, many different formulas. So Sleep Builder became a natural segue that I was already doing. And the ingredients were already ingredients that I was using. But I think what's so important is not only that the ingredients are good and backed and it's not scam-like. And I mean that, like, yes, everybody needs to make a living, but I truly believe the people that are behind this, aren't doing it for the money, so to speak. They're doing it because they believe the board that we have, the people behind it, and what we're doing. And we've all been around sports. So, and it tastes good. And those things, but it tastes, and I say that because I'll tell you what, like with aminos, people aren't going to take aminos if they, no matter how you tell them it's important, but if it's giving them dry mouth and making them nauseous and it just tastes awful, they're not going to drink it, or the greens or whatever. So yeah, like I said earlier to you, sure, you can make anything taste good when it looks like antifreeze and you have every type of aspartame and sucralose in there. But if you want to do things holistically and with quality control, it's really hard to make things taste good.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, the Sleep Builder formulation was super interesting to me, eye-opening, coming from a world where I'm more football, baseball. So either I'm not dealing with the issues of the travel because you're playing once a week, and a lot of times it's within the same time zone. Baseball, I've just tended to not ask questions because I was first told working in baseball that there's. I'll tell you who told me this. His name. I don't know if you know the name Greg Zahn.
I do.
So Greg Zahn was a catcher for the.
Who did he play for?
Well, he played for the Houston. What's the team in Houston? The Texans. He played for the Texans.
I do.
So he played down in Houston, and he was a commentator up in Toronto for Sportsnet for many years. And I ran into him later in his career, very storied. He played 12 or 15 years or something in Major League Baseball, back in when baseball was baseball, steroid era baseball, the whole 9 yards. He told me a story once, and I hope I'm not outing him, that at spring training, the Dominicans would come, and there'd be a special coffee pot called the Greenies, because they would just take all the Adderall and just empty the caps into the coffee pot with the green rim. And that's, your little pick-me-up. And he told me, he's like, hey, look, alcohol, Adderall, and Ambien. That's Major League Baseball.
Well, like I trained Mark Teixeira, and so I trained him like at the end of his career, got him to the All-Star game, and he would tell me stories. And I just remember growing up, like you would literally see. I'll never forget Keith Hernandez. He's the first baseman for the New York Mets when the Mets won the World Series. He hits a home run. He runs around. He gets into the dugout and he starts just hacking a dart right there in the dugout. Just boom, like post home run, and like. Teixeira would tell me stories how like in the clubhouse, those guys are like banging down club sandwiches and like just having at it. And yeah, but I've heard many stories about the greenies and all these different things. And, the other thing to add to that is like these guys don't even know that they're not sleeping well, right? Like that's the other part of it. It's like a lot of times you could say, hey, how's your sleep? And it's like, oh, it's pretty good. And I'm not a huge fan of wearing things to like while you're sleeping. That's another conversation. But, then when you start looking at that, then they start seeing. But I don't quantify that by as much. Like Charles used to say, if I don't even know how to say this. If you're not waking up with like morning wood, you're not sleeping right. And that's the correct way to sleep. Right. So I guess that's the safest way to say it. But
now, when you're looking at something like over time adapting, talking about adaptogen, talking about rhodiola, talking about these things that were used in the early days of trying to supplement for sleep quality. I remember post workout. I bet you I still have the bottle at my house. And what I would have paid for phosphatidylserine 20 years ago was just like, it was my allowance for like 3 months.
But how many capsules? Like I remember like the stack was, it's like acetyl L-carnitine and carnitine on an empty stomach with like 5 grams. And then post-workout, you're taking, I don't remember, but like in the grams for phosphatidylserine post-workout, along with like waxy maize. And like we had guys in the NFL that I'm telling you, Charles just had this like, it looked like a giant dog food in the kitchen, right? And it was whey protein isolate. And then he had another one, which was just carb powder. And this was back in the day. I don't even know if you would remember, but Twin Lab made something called Ultra Fuel. And it was like this like blue carb Ultra Fuel. And I mean, tasted like, so anyway, we would do Twin Lab Ultra Fuel, carb powder, which at the time wasn't like a pentacarb. It was like, I think it was dextrose and I don't remember. And then we would do like half a box of cereal. And these guys, never mind diabetes, it's like every day they would come back and get leaner and leaner and leaner. It was just wild with like these gifted guys. And I'm telling you, we had boxes of cereal, carb powder, protein, and that was really the like post-workout. And then Rice Krispies was big. And he would just, keep doing their body fat and keep checking and just seeing like how much muscle they're putting on.
It's so not fair. You'd be amputating my foot in like a week.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. We got like DBs and wide receivers, and then like the offensive lineman, he would be like, you get, glutamine. So they would call it the like fat. So the other shake, I forgot to tell you the other shake. This would be your shake. Would be 60 grams of protein, glycine, which is it's like a grit shake. So you're doing 60 grams of whey, glutamine, glycine, and greens, and that's all you get until you're like you can see your abs.
God, so funny. So when did you start to? Because I mean, the formula for Sleep Builder is super interesting because it kind of comes diagonally at the problem, right? And that was something that. The time zone thing really, it's funny that it took me listening to you talk about the formulation to be like, oh yeah, fuck. Like, because I had trouble with sleep, was traveling a lot. I mean, I was on 80 flights a year minimum for the last 7 years. And in and out international, in and out domestic, East Coast, West Coast, you name it. And so like, how did you break away from the herbals? How do you get away from like the siren song of melatonin? Like, and then why the ingredients that you picked? Like, what was, like, how did you kind of bring like, okay, this is our starting 7. This is what's going into this thing. And these are the problems it solves.
Well, I mean, you know, because you were there, and it was really Dave Lawrence that really pushed. Like I actually wanted some other things, and not some of the. Like, we don't need to talk about what's in there.
Yeah,
Really,
we're on the Zoom calls already.
yeah, yeah. But obviously, early on, you know, you, me, Andy, Dave, Jordan, Matt was kind of came in on the end there, and you know, we had those calls when Jordan's talking seems like hours, and you know, Dave was really that was his baby in terms of that formula, and you know, coming from Charles's sort of tree, you know, adding the glutamine and things that I was thinking something different, but the answer really is us kind of all of us kind of going back and forth. If you remember, I mean, you know, obviously Andy, you know, I don't want maybe not brilliant, but that guy knows his supplements, and he's really, really, really smart when it comes to supplements and the ingredients. And so to get on a call, you know, and for me, you know, I would classify my expertise is in the gym and coaching and training and programs. And that's what I'm on the road to being a master. And I have obviously been dealing with nutrition forever, but, you know, hearing Andy and yourself and Dave really go on about the different stuff sort of, you know, brought me back to the Charles days of prioritizing the ingredients and changing the way it is, and you know, adding not too much, right, and using what's correct and using the right dosage, so to speak.
I'm curious across like the line of products that we have. When you look at like, if you were to look across and be like, hey, this strategy, this thumbprint is closest to your philosophy. Like, what product to you goes, oh yeah, this product is like closest to, you know, that fucking Lawrence guy didn't get in the way. What do you look at and you go like, yeah,
well, I
that
think it's
one
coming. My
yeah.
baby is coming, but like there's two that are coming. One for here, and you know, we. But I would say I love. You know, I think the sleep builder and the greens, because I'm coming from a greens, and I tell you why with the greens. I'm coming from a place where, again, who knows? Like Charles is always like, take greens, it's going to alkalize the stomach. It's going to have, I mean, this is again 20 plus years ago, and I didn't know. I was just kind of following and listening. But I did greens religiously, but who knows how much heavy metals and things that were the greens that I was ingesting. I've done blood work since, but my point being, you know, to use a quality greens that taste really good, and I shouldn't just say greens, right? It's fruits and greens, and I mean, the fruits and greens, and the reason being is I'm not going to talk about other products that are way inferior, that are maybe have much more of a budget. But it's super important because athletes don't eat enough vegetables and eat enough fruit. And I mean, and I'm telling you, I have professional athletes. You're going to think I'm joking. I have more than one, like probably more than three, that like haven't eaten a vegetable in like as long as they can remember. Like they've probably read a book earlier than they've eaten a vegetable. That's how long it's been.
I mean, when you look at the number of ingredients in a conventional greens product, and then you think of the
Like
monumental
this.
task, but how do you make that taste good?
Right.
Right, that's the biggest thing for me, and it's like, you know, you can use a 3PL, you can use a contract manufacturer, and it's like, sure, maybe you get all that right, but even if you're trying to play label wars, getting the taste right, and that's the thing that I think I've noticed even in my relatively short career, is when I started and was working with athletes, and it maybe just be a trend of like athletes on the side of the hill versus athletes on the top of the hill. Like the athlete on the side of the hill metaphorically is hungrier and he'll do whatever it takes. Like I know kids who were raised off of whey byproduct from milk farms.
Yeah.
That they're like, I don't give a shit what, they will lick the floor if it means that they were going to get them better.
Yeah.
But, you know, the taste thing, it seems like, you know, you go in the stores and there's protein that tastes like Oreo cookies. It's like, man, you had to endure, right? What did you call it? Fucking windshield washer fluid or whatever the fuck.
Antifreeze.
Antifreeze. Yeah, that's right. And it's like, you know, I think, but there's a silver lining to the demand for taste being high in athletes now is like, you got to figure your shit out.
Yeah.
Like you have to figure out your formulations because you can't get away with we're just going to put it all in anymore. Because the second you start adding, especially with a greens product, the raw materials of a lot of the ingredients in green products are almost to a point where unless you're putting the antifreeze shit in, you're not overriding that taste. Like there's no off switch there.
No, I mean, especially with like branch chains, it's very, very difficult. And people like, look, I went, you're like, to your point, people have no idea. Like I went to a probiotic plant where I was used this years ago to make, because again, you talk about ethical and the responsibility to make sure your athletes are taking the best things. I mean, that's something that, I'm not giving them anything unless it's the best. Because they're trusting me. And, so I went to when I was looking into probiotics, this was 10 years ago, I went to a probiotic plant and like hair net, hair face, like lab coat like getting this is pre-COVID. It's like your hands get blown out. You walk in another door, you put the booties on and I mean, everything that goes into these plants, it's amazing to think that like, also, I think what people have to understand is if it doesn't have NSF, well, if it has NSF, that doesn't mean that it's a good product. That just means that they paid the money to get certified for sport. That doesn't necessarily mean that what's in there is quality. So when you do what we've done, where you create quality products and our NSF, that's like something that I don't think people really understand. It's like, that's the double whammy.
What got me, and I'll tell this story till the day I die, so we finally get to the other end of the formulations. We left, I don't know, maybe we left 5 products on the cutting room floor, maybe more. I still have the spreadsheet somewhere that we'd pull up and we would go through the ingredients and the dosages, and then Boxer would come back and be like, well, we could fit a little bit more into this capsule. Should we put something in? It's like, well, are we just putting it in to fill it? And I remember at the end of it, we're like, like a year of fucking Zoom calls every week. You tearing Boxer apart for saying something stupid. And then
you did like that part,
dude, that was my favorite part of all of my weeks, was you just like, I wonder what he's going to say to Boxer. And after all of it was done, we're finally like, oh, yes, all right, we'll get this stuff going. We'll get our first batches of samples. We'll start testing flavors and all that. And, I think we may even be past that stage. And I remember there was a conversation of like, hey, like, we're ready to go. We can start kind of promoting it. And you just went, no. And I was like, what?
Right.
Like, what the fuck? And it was like, oh, this is the level. This is where we're playing at, right? This is because you were like, I haven't fucking tried it yet.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, again, that sounds like I'm like, he was very much like, let's get this shit out. Let's get people buying it. I mean, he's got people to answer to. And I'm like, how can I... I'm not going to tell somebody to take this if I haven't even tried it myself for not just once. I got to like see how it's going to, affect me on a daily basis. I mean, look, me like enough on these. I do not sell shit. Like I'm not a good salesman. That's not what I do. I do things by I'll walk the walk and talk the talk. And I drink Sleep Builder every single night since we've had it. And I take the greens myself, and I can tell you things like the people at my gym love the chocolate whey protein, think it tastes like, Cocoa Puffs or whatever the case. And they love it and keep going back for more. And these are not sales. This is actual shit that goes on. And like, I encourage people like, just as we have strength coaches that like to inflate all the things they're talking about, go see that person. You want to see what we're doing? Come down to my gym. And you'll see, over 100 athletes a day. And the only thing that I'm selling is what I believe in. And guess what? I mean, the reality is, do I use 2 other products that aren't spoken? I do, because we haven't come out with that yet. And I'm going to use, just like I don't believe there's one piece of equipment, one company that makes the best pieces of equipment for everything. That's why I never in my career in a gym of 25 years have one line of equipment. How's that possible? So, I think with what we're doing, and it was important to us early on, right? Like, we're not going to, we made a decision that we're like, hey, we're not trying to make 50 products. We want to make the products that they need the most, and let's make these the best. And you can't do that like overnight. So it's going to take some time. And, the ones that we have, I stand by them, and I really are proud of what we've done. And, but yeah, I am not a good salesman. And, like I said, Jordan, I'm sure he wants more of me, but to me, I'm a salesman by training more athletes than anybody and having them take the stuff that I believe in, as opposed to, getting out there and doing a song and a dance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you look across the board, like Andy O'Brien, you, Dave, Bree, Allen, Frakes, Sachin, it's like these people. I don't know. I can't think of a single supplement company that anyone other than Boxer's previous affiliation with DFH. Other than that, anyone
Yeah, and I was there.
Outward facing relationship.
Yeah, and I was there, and look, I want to, and I've spoken to him about this. Like, I have hopes for us to do things where we, instead of doing these kind of one-offs where we all get together and we as we do more, that we get together. And I think, look, at this point in my life, I'm not interested. I think like the guru Keanu Reeves said something like to the effect of, "Hey, I'm so old now. Like, if you tell me 5 + 5 is 11, I'm just going to believe you." And that's essentially where I'm at in my life. That I don't choose to argue with anybody. I want to surround myself with like-minded individuals that are, have the same kind of beliefs as me, or I'm going to, hide in Arizona for the rest of my life. And so to get together and to, sort of really try to come up with something great is fun. But it's not easy. And, and that's the challenge that I have. So, and I think like we all bring different pieces of it's like, you come together and each one of us, none of us are really the same, right? I think we all bring different elements to the table, which I think always makes a really good team.
Yeah. I think the proof is in the products, as well as we say now.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming out of hiding in at New York now, but yeah, we'll have to run this back, and I think in person may be a better forum next time. So I appreciate you taking the time, man. Obviously,
Absolutely.
It's been a ton of fun, like learning from you and getting to get exposed to your stuff, and obviously it's been interesting to see the similar circles we've run adjacent with. All these times, like, hey, that guy was staying at my house last week. It's like I've done fucking 6 months worth of internships at Prentiss' spot. I was like, oh, no way. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got to next time to city, you got to get on the train and come down.
I'm gonna have to make that a point. Yeah, before the year's out, I'll get with you offline. We got some stuff moving in the offseason. I actually need your advice on a few things.
Right.
But I definitely, if the schedule, let's say my schedule may be permitting very soon here in the near future, and I'll let you know. So
right.
You don't want to extend that invite because you have to burn the fucking place down to get me to leave. Well, anyways, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll chat to you real soon.